Well, that was a fantastic morning. I'm feeling very inspired, and I am reminded of what characters fishermen can be. Someone on this panel was just saying that Chuck from Pacific Foods was just saying that fishermen are sort of like farmers who want to be even lonelier than farmers are, and we're looking for an even more dangerous profession where they could curse and joke even more. So this session is now bringing us back to the land, back onto the land, and first I have to note there's a couple of corrections. I am not Gary Paul Nabhan. Gary, unfortunately, because of an injury, could not make it. We're sad to say. He is an edible publisher and a great leader and voice in the food movement. So we miss his presence today. I'm Brian Hallweil, the editor of Edible East End and the publisher of the edible magazines in New York City and on Long Island. And I am excited to be moderating this panel because in some ways it sums up what brought me to food and to edible. My background was in environmental journalism. I wrote about climate change and global population growth and fossil fuel use and all these really exciting global environmental issues that were particularly depressing. And I found that when I wrote about food, it was a sort of gateway issue to connect with people in a much more positive, personal, action-oriented way to connect them to ecological trends. And I found that I got this incredible response to any food writing compared to the response, sometimes no response, that I got to sort of writing about dismal environmental trends. And one of the early themes of my work that I think cuts across so much of what we do today is that agriculture and ecological goals cannot be on different sides of the river. There's sort of a false dichotomy between them. And if that dichotomy exists, we will fail in a really big way, simply because agriculture takes up such a huge chunk of our planet. About 40% of the landmass on Earth is used in some way for farming or ranching. Agriculture consumes about 75% of the fresh water on the planet. It's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So if we don't think of our agriculture not just for producing food, but for also the purpose of healing ecosystems, then we will fail. And that is the subject of this session, and we've invited several farmers from the region and also one from the Pacific Northwest to talk about what farm-based ecosystem restoration looks like, what form it takes on their farms, what form it takes at different scales, and how agriculture can play a role, again, not just in raising food, which we think of as the primary purpose of agriculture, but in being a part of a healthy ecosystem and actually reinforcing all the conservation goals that we heard a little bit about. So I want to start with Scott Chaskey. Scott Chaskey is the founding farmer of Quail Hill Farm in my neck of the woods in Amagansett on Long Island. And as we heard earlier, Quail Hill was the first organic community-supported agriculture farm in New York State. It's part of the Peconic Land Trust, which is the land trust on the east end of Long Island. And Scott also has a new book out called Seed Time. Scott is a poet and author beyond being just a farmer. And his book is about his interaction with seeds and seed diversity. And I guess what I want to ask Scott, and I'll ask some of the other farmers, is can you describe how ecosystem restoration fits into your farm's model?
Thank you, Brian, and nice to be here. Hello, all. I just want to start off by saying you can try and contact me at whatever that is, Noston Drinks, but I won't get it. So you can find me through the Peconic Land Trust if you'd like to, or come and visit at Quail Hill. So this is a wonderful question. What we have found, I think we've found first by accident, and then after that by design. and the accidental part of it is that we started a community farm, a CSA, which was meant to really link people directly to the land. So I like the fact that this panel description is about people and pollinators, because on our particular CSA farm, the members actually come and harvest their own food. So they're interacting as directly as possible with the land, with the landscape, and with the soil. So we're in a potato growing region, and every field that we grow in now, and we've kept expanding for 25 years, originally had potatoes in it. So, you know, it was a monoculture. And what we've done, first accidentally and then later by looking at how those accidents actually improved the crop fields and everything that we do, is that we've gone for diversity, basically. So in these potato fields, I remember the first year that we farmed, we couldn't find a single worm in 4 acres of ground, and that's extraordinary. We now have beautiful soil teeming with worms, so that's a nice introduction and a natural one. We also there's a field that we farmed for 4 years because it was right along the road, basically, and it was the right place to begin. Since that time, and I do remember a fellow coming along who, with his binoculars, looking for butterflies, and he said to me, sort of, you know, longingly, he said, you know, the milkweed used to really love this spot, and, you know, he was kindly saying it would be nice to have the milkweed come back. So what we've done is we've let that happen. We've let the milkweed come back, and that's, so we've combined the cultivated fields with the wild, and we've sort of nursed the wild, because there are times where the invasives come in, and that's not exactly what we want either. So sometimes we may eliminate some of that, but we've left everything else that's there. So adjacent to all of the fields where we grow row crops, we also have hedges. And you know, as I was used to in England when I farmed there for many years. And whatever we're doing, we're bringing in, while we're harvesting, you know, row crops, and people are harvesting their own, we're also home to an amazing amount of pollinators, some through the wild that we leave there, and some through the green manure crops like buckwheat that bring so many pollinators to the farm. It's extraordinary. And I just want to mention one wonderful fact is that a nine-spotted ladybug, which was thought to be extinct on the East Coast for 50 years, was found on our farm. And when we called the Lost Ladybug Project at Cornell, they were down there in 2 days. And now they're back there every year. And as yet, the nine-spotted hasn't been found anywhere else, but it likes our farm.
No, I was going to ask if you have evidence of success, and there it is. One quick follow-up. The hedgerows, the milkweed, is it, I'm you know, sort of playing the fool. It's not just for aesthetics. What can you mention a few specific functions apart from attracting the nine-spotted ladybug and allowing birders to come to the farm?
Well, I think mainly it's attracting the monarch butterfly, because it's the food for the monarchs. And recently joined, I think Jack has too, Make Way for Monarchs, which is Gary Paul's organization, and the monarchs are in big trouble. So that's the main reason that we're letting the milkweed flourish, actually, besides the fact that it's an extraordinary plant.
And the hedgerows, apart from housing birds, has there been some benefit in terms of erosion in our windswept area?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the perfect answer. Yeah.
Well, going down the line to Jack Algier, who's the vegetable farmer at Stone Barns up in Pocanico Hills, and we heard from Dan Barber a couple of days ago, and Jack is a major character in Dan's new book, The Third Plate, and is a hero in the book. Jack, I guess I will ask you the same question, I think your farm, the role of your farm in ecosystem restoration, bringing the wild into the farm, even in some ways goes beyond what's happening at Quail Hill because of the direct connection with the restaurant. So again, I put to you, how do you work, how does ecosystem restoration fit into your farm? And then if you could also say how it fits into the philosophy of the restaurant.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here and see everyone. I sort of feel like I'm inside of a tree ring here. So I think having the farm be agriculture within nature is a really important principle, in that we understand that the farm provides a lot more value than just economics, that ecological services are necessary for reducing risks and for reducing the unpredictabilities that happen on the farm. So we don't spray pesticides, and we really rely on good biological exchange, so that really does require that we give a lot back. So hedgerows, a lot of what we call ecotone has to happen, that there needs to be lots of space between the little organs of ecosystems that are on the farm. For one, just from an ecological standpoint, without getting into sales yet, that the idea is that everything is sharing the whole place, whether we're actually cutting through it with a plow or we're leaving it alone, it's still contributing in some way or another. And we want to be able to sort of find the farm within the farm in that way. We can find the value in each one of those things. And if we're finding something that is actually mining or degrading the system, that we focus on trying to solve that in a way. One of the big things that mines and degrades farms is usually the demand by the consumer. So it's great to be working with a brilliant mind like Dan, who is very open to really, in fact, searching for the things that aren't available, and those things that in a way are what's extra from us. So right now we're in the thick of ephemerals, so we're really doing a lot of wild crafting. I brought a few things that as a beautiful bed of arugula goes to flower, most people just pull that crop out. We get a second crop of those flowers. They're actually extraordinary. They're very sweet, the same with the mustards. It's like quince flowers and all of these different things. Right now there's a lot of flowers, but also roots that are in the woods, all the dandelions that exist. And by not having a spray regimen, everything is game. There's no toxic lawn situation. There's no sprayed herbicide hedgerows. That we allow these things to come back in. It's really great to have a chef and a restaurant and also an entire consumer base. We have CSA and we have farm market, and I think Dan has actually led that push in a way, but by giving us sort of the freedom to bring some new things to the market, it's also changing the community around us, and it's opening the mind of the CSA members and the market goers, where it's not so much like they're trying to reclaim what they've seen at the grocery store, that there are brand new things there for them all the time. And that is really opening their eyes and actually making it much more economical for us to do ecological things. So that's where the hinge is in that social responsibility. And then we're, holding our, able to focus on things like soil health and water absorption and cleansing of that. And then we're also have all these hedgerows that are keeping the water supply around us clear, and pollinators and that sort of thing. You mentioned something about direct benefits. We have a lot of bees, honeybees, on the farm, but we also have a lot of solitary bees and other things that are there, lots of butterflies. And we start to see those populations increasing by different species, but also we see the honey become more and more. And that's contributed to by having a much broader spectrum of flowering plants earlier in the season, all of the clovers in the pathways, all these things, rather than just mowing the space to the fence lines, really having nothing for them to eat, and real deserts in certain seasons.
So rather than taking up space that would go for food, you see it as actually expanding the options of food that you're getting from the farm.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a nice segue to the next person down the line, Ken Green, who's one of the founders of the Hudson Valley Seed Library, the first seed library in our area, I think the closest one for New Yorkers and folks in the Hudson Valley. Your business depends on diversity. I know that you grow out a lot of the seeds on your own farm, but as a seed saver and seed library manager, you've sort of got to be concerned about ecosystem restoration and diversity of planting, not just on your own farm, but well beyond. How do you not just, I'm interested in hearing how you encourage it among the gardeners that you sell to and the farmers that you sell to.
Well, you know, what we do on our farm is the foundation of farming, producing the seeds. And I think that what we think of as our responsibility is increasing the diversity and availability of organic seed for home gardeners and farmers. And that's a real ecological mission. Scott was talking about diversifying on the farm rather than having one crop, having a lot of crops, and how important that is in terms of thinking about ecological restoration. There are, over the last 100 years, there have been fewer and fewer and fewer varieties available. We've seen this massive loss of genetic diversity globally and locally, and that's really the heart of and you know, why we started doing what we're doing, is to make sure that we're actually increasing the diversity of what's available for farmers over time, and specifically seeds that do well in organic systems. Because not necessarily all the seeds that are available that have been produced in chemical systems, they are actually bred to do well in chemical farming systems. Whereas when we're producing seeds using organic systems, they're actually performing better in organic systems. And so the more we can say, there are options, you can be successful being an organic farmer, you can be successful being an organic grower of any kind, here are all these great organic seeds, then the more options there are, the more people get excited about transitioning to organic, which is, you know, in terms of the natural ecosystems, that's the first and foremost thing that farmers and gardeners need to understand, that they can easily do with, you know, a little bit of new knowledge that will have an impact on their natural communities that they're surrounded by.
Mm-hmm. Have you found a learning curve for your gardeners where people are frightened to try new varieties, or they're saying, I'm not an organic grower at home or on my farm, but I'm willing to learn?
It's changed so much over the last 10 years. When we started this, people hadn't really didn't really understand what an heirloom was or what open pollinated was. They weren't really asking for organic varieties. Last 2-3 years, it's like the first question people ask us, are these certified organic? And that's really an exciting question to me. I'm like, people are paying attention. Like, it's working. You know, we're getting there. And I think also, you know, in terms of thinking about certified organic seed and what's available, a lot of people don't think about seeds as the foundation, that there's this whole agriculture system hidden behind farms. And there's a lot of people who are interested in, where does my food come from? Can I meet my farmer? How are they growing it? And connecting to the food. But then we can actually also connect to, where did my seeds come from, and how were the seeds grown, and who's growing the seeds, and, you know, what is that supporting in terms of the economy, in terms of the natural environment. And so, you know, we've really tried to be part of helping people ask those questions and make those transitions. And the other thing that we're always looking at is, well, how much can we push the diversity for our region? Because the Northeast has been largely ignored in terms of seed production for like 60 years, basically. And so we're always experimenting on the farm. Can we produce seeds? Can we produce sesame? Can we produce okra? Can we produce sweet potato slips? What can we do in our region to improve the diversity? And we're also looking a lot at, what are the native varieties that we should be providing seed for? So that if someone wants to do a hedgerow or someone wants to share their farm space in some way with the natural environment, what are the right varieties for our region that makes sense for them to grow? And so we're adding those to the catalog. And then we're also experimenting with, are there other varieties that attract native pollinators that are habitat and nectaries for beneficial insects of all kinds that our farmers can add into their systems? And one of those, Scott, did you get to see the balloon vine when it was growing when you came?
No.
It wasn't up. So there's this crazy vine called balloon vine. It's cardiospermum. It's also called heartseed. It's actually from India. It's this very vigorous vine. It looks totally poisonous. You'd never think about eating it. It makes these green inflated pods that you can actually pop. I don't know how a plant actually inflates something, but it does. And it has these little tiny indistinct, just like itsy bitsy white flowers. And it is the #1 pollinator and beneficial insect attractor for that season when we were just trialing it. We were like, this is a beneficial plant. This is a seed that farmers need to know about, that gardeners need to know about. And we've become the only certified organic domestic producer of balloon vine seed in the country.
Oh. I want to come back and talk a little more about what you're doing, all of you are doing, to breed for climate change, which was something, Ken, we were talking about last night, and figuring out what varieties the Hudson Valley will be growing 10 or 20 years from now, and how diversity on the farm will help us hedge against that. But I also want to hear from Chuck Eggert, who's the founder of Pacific Foods and also a farmer in the Willamette Valley, and to ask you how this philosophy takes hold at scale, and just to do some scale comparison. So Quail Hill is almost 200 acres, not all farmed?
Yeah, well, we're growing vegetable crops on about 30, but we're taking care of a couple hundred acres. Yeah.
And Stone Barns?
88.
88.
With about 7 vegetables.
And?
We have 30 acres of forest with 10 acres of farm in the middle, which actually is very important to us because it means we don't have to worry about cross-pollination from GMO crops in our area.
And tell us a little bit about the scale and size of your operation.
Well, this is where I get thrown out of the meeting because we're actually farming about 4,000 acres. 2,000 of it is within the Willamette Valley, which many of you know is one of the richest natural valleys in the United States for all kinds of agriculture, a lot of seed. And we have 2,000 acres right next to a natural flyover for ducks and geese in eastern Oregon where we grow alfalfa and other grains. Pacific Foods started as a organic company 28 years ago, and a lot of our reason for getting into farming was we couldn't get a supply of products to meet the need. Currently we have 4 organic dairies that are all animal welfare approved, which shows that you can have a large dairy and still have the equilibrium necessary to treat animals well. And at any given time, we have about 100,000 heirloom chickens and turkeys that are all, if any of you are familiar with Whole Foods, GAP 5. And we're doing this because heirlooms are better balanced for the land. They live better on the land. They weed for you. They clean up areas for you, and you can put them into zones that need to be environmentally transitioned. And so we're doing it primarily to provide the products that we need for our products that are at retail. And we take all of our marginal zones in between the areas we're farming and plant them to pollinators. So we put in lavender and rosemary and all kinds of things that will attract the bees, because if they come, the alfalfa grows better, the birds come back, and you get a better balance. We've restored about 20 acres of wetlands where we've dug up terracotta tile and planted it back to the way it was, in 1800, which is really old in Oregon. And we just find that as we take the margins of the properties and do it, we can actually raise the animals cheaper. You know, I think within 2 years, organic milk will be cheaper to produce than conventional because of the environmental issues with conventional, and we can show people that it works and it can work at scale, and despite what big agriculture will tell you, you can still farm responsibly and make money.
Do you buy from other farmers, a network of other farmers?
We do. We produce almost all our own milk. We'll produce about 40 million pounds of milk. So when you buy our soup, you get our milk from our organic farms. But we still have to buy some poultry. But we've just switched recently to an heirloom variety of, if any of you had the naked neck chickens, we switched to those from a white chicken just because they like to go outside. And they taste great. And the irony is that it costs you about 10% more to grow an heirloom, and you get about 50% more flavor. So it makes up for it.
And a nice price margin, I imagine.
Well, not in our world.
And what influence have you had on your neighbors? So you're farming a lot of land, so you must touch up against some neighbors.
Yeah, it's been interesting because we're in an area of very conventional farmers, and as they're starting to convert to organic, and organic is a tool. We became organic because we felt that it was the right thing to do. And as we show them, and mostly as we buy from them, we had one neighbor that grew celery for us, and his father-in-law, who's conventional, came to pick up his check because the kid owed him money. And his son-in-law made like $400,000 growing organic celery, and the father-in-law goes, there might be something to this. But I think we're in a place where the food paradigm is shifting, and I think it's really positive, and it's really going to be beneficial for those of us that feel that we can change the way people eat.
So what can we say about how this type of farming is actually not just benefiting your farms right now, but is going to make you more prepared for the more erratic weather events and other manifestations of climate change that we're seeing? I mean, on the one hand, what I'm hearing from Jack, and of course all of you, is if the eaters are supporting a diversity of foods, if they're craving, if they're hungry for a diversity of foods on their plate, then that flows back to the farm and reinforces it. But there's something else we've got to be concerned about, and that is, what sort of rainfall and what sort of nighttime temperatures and daytime temperatures are you going to be facing? How are you working concerns about climate change into your farm plan?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that we sort of alluded to that in the diversity piece too, but well, I think from everyone that's sitting here, the idea of diversification is the key to that, because it really allows us to, diversity reduces risk of catastrophic loss. That's a big piece, is that when you have multiple species of things that one that doesn't do well, another may do well, and take some of that and just still allow some production. And even within those species, that there's variety selection that is being improved and more is stabilizing year after year and acclimating to your place. So I've worked with Ken for some time now, and some different groups of, we save our own seed and are in groups that are really looking at doing more of that for regional production of seeds, so that those plants can actually adapt better in the shifting environment that we have in the Northeast comparatively to a shifting environment in California or Washington or other places that you can't look at these crops globally, really. They're sort of specific to site, especially heirlooms, or have been bred very specifically to one particular site. But I think growing a lot of things also, we get a really clear picture of what does well. You don't know really when you're going to plant for pollinators and you're going to take on that, those choices that nature would have made for itself. When we start to make those choices, not everything works, and we see what works. And then through our observation perpetuate those things without trying to narrow it down too far.
So a few years ago, does everyone's heard of late blight? Most people probably have. It doesn't, I don't think, have anything to do with climate change, but a few years ago, I mean, late blight's been with us. You know, it caused the Irish potato famine, and the famine all over, potato famine all over Europe in the 1840s and 50s. Anyhow, it's hit pretty hard in the Northeast, and a few years ago, 2009, I think it was, when we first experienced it, we lost all our tomato crop. And except for some of them held on longer than others, and then we wondered why these 4 particular varieties were holding on. And in fact, those were all tomato varieties that we had saved our own seed from. And so what I think is most important when you're thinking in terms of, because farmers are dealing with weather daily, and you know, we've all dealt with droughts and too much rain, and you know, so the way to adapt to it as a farmer, and then therefore to pass this knowledge on to other people when you're dealing with plants, is to open your eyes and see what's happening. And the more diversity that you encourage, and the more varieties that you grow. For instance, we grow over 500 varieties of vegetables and flowers, and it's a daunting task to watch all of those and to see what's happening with all of those. But you're gonna, if you really want to improve what you're doing and to recognize how certain plants are going to behave in a varying climate, you have to really observe all of that. And at the same time, you have to observe what's in the hedgerow and see what's happening there. I learn a lot from our beekeeper. We have a wonderful beekeeper who, Mary Woltz, who has bees' needs, and she's always thinking about the bees' needs. And so she'll say, well, you know, the goldenrod isn't flowering the way that it normally does in the autumn, or maybe the locust flowers in the spring. There's a short. So she's watching so closely, and if we're watching like that as farmers and all agriculturalists and the consumers who are you know, part of it all, then we're going to learn how to adapt. And so what we need most to keep in mind is a resiliency in terms of change, and that's a resiliency within ourselves as well.
I gotta say this before I forget, Jack. I have 20 pounds of panther edamame seed for you.
Great.
And I keep forgetting. It's at our booth at the Union Square Farmers Market.
Okay.
So maybe we can walk there after and get it. Because I don't want to drive home with it and then have to come give it to you.
Unless someone in the audience beats you to it, right?
Farmers are efficient people. They do lots of business at once. Yeah.
I think, you know, just to add to this, there's been massive consolidation of seed resources globally and in terms of in our country. And one of the big threats with climate change is that if all of our brassica seed is being grown in your area, our kales, our collards, our canola, all of our brassica seeds, which is where most organic especially, but other brassica seed production has been consolidated by these large multinational corporations who control seed resources. They do it because it's the right climate, it's cheaper, and it makes sense business-wise. But in terms of climate change, if something were to happen, and there was a shift in the climate of that valley, and we were no longer able to produce quality brassica seed there, we would lose most of the diversity of brassica seed in one catastrophic event. And so that's part of why we're always pushing the edge of what seeds can we produce in our region, because we need diversification on the farms, what farmers are doing, but we need diversification of seed resources and specifically where seeds are being grown. And just like an Irish potato famine, you have everything in one place and you lose it all at once and no one else is doing it. When we started growing seed in the Northeast, it was amazing how many people said, you can't do that. You can't grow broccoli seed in the Northeast. You can't grow, it was just like, you can't. And I kept saying, well, that's exactly why we're doing it. That's, that is the reason right there. You tell me I can't, therefore I better do it. And I think we've shown that, even if it's not the most economically sound way of producing seed, it is the most ecologically sound way of producing seed, is to have regional seed. And part of that for us is we have trial gardens, and we're bringing in seeds, and we're growing them, and we're comparing all these different strains and different varieties to see what is going to perform best for our region. Or we're seeing maybe there's nothing that performs particularly well for our region, so we better start doing some breeding work on this variety. And the main thing that we breed for Northeast adapted varieties that is related to climate change is this idea of the plant's ability, and you use the word resilience, I think that's really what sums it up, the plant's ability to deal with unpredictable weather patterns. We're used to having plants that, they need a cool spring, and they don't want big temperature swings, and it needs to be dry at this time, and it needs to be wet at this time, and we don't have that right now when we're growing. We have unpredictability. So, we have like a pepper we've been working on for 8 years now, that it's a short season, blocky red bell pepper that produces consistently, even in the season when we had a hurricane that caused, like, we couldn't even walk out into our fields. It was like jello for weeks, and we just had to kind of watch what plants suffered and what plants, were able to deal. And that pepper that we've been working on for all those years still produced. It was leaning over, but it still was able to produce. And that kind of breeding of saying, let's increase the diversity within the genetics of the actual variety so that it has all of these skills to draw on, depending on what happens weather-wise. That's sort of the breeding work side of things.
We've been hearing a lot about early season varieties. I wonder if that's going to be a major trend in terms of what allows farms to deal with strange weather events. I mean, I suppose if we're only growing early season peppers and corn and early maturing potatoes, that's a loss of diversity in another way, but it sure seems like a good way to, reduce the amount of time that you're susceptible to weird weather events.
You need it all.
Yeah.
You need it all.
But I would just add, one of the things you never want to do is tell an organic farmer they can't do something. That's like, but one of the other things is we've gone back and gotten the original wheats planted in Oregon from the 1840s, and barley and oats, and we're doing trials on quinoa with the goal of having all of our feed for our animals sourced within about 20 miles within the next 2 or 3 years. And I think, and it's been changing how you raise the animals to take advantage of the season so that you're not trying to raise a chicken in January.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to mention too that the having diversified systems, the animal systems are a big one for diversifying the grass species and the different things that are there on the ground, and that really does help because they're all sort of preparing for the next. Another thing is, as far as our farm diversity, we really do spend a lot of energy on our greenhouse systems, and we have biologically exchangeable greenhouse systems. Farm a half acre of range that is in soil and very, very productive, and a very intensive food production year-round that actually does block the extremes of the environment, but it's not an extremely controlled environment. So it's very low energy inputs, very high production, and rich organic soils. So, we have, in the Northeast particularly, we've lost over 1,000 acres of greenhouses over the past 30 years that really have no method to return to, yet we are really put up against the cost of development. So, and the nice thing about cover of greenhouses is that actually helps to support the climate variability issues, all these different things that are changing, the big changes that happen, heavy storms, unpredictable weather patterns. The greenhouses are extremely valuable for keeping us on track in the production system, and there really are not a lot of replicable methods.
I think we will take some questions from the audience if folks want to hop up.
Hi, I'm Amanda Cothran. I'm the editor of Edibles Arkansas, which is the northwest corner of Arkansas. And I have a small scale question for you. Many of my readers have between like 2 and 20 acres that they're trying to do their best to grow their own and use the pollinating plants for the species. Do you have any suggestion on pollinators that would fight invasives, specifically Bermuda grass? What could we plant combating Bermuda grass? Anything? Right. No, I've asked this before.
Combating
Bermuda grass.
yeah.
Your discussion about the clover pathways and all of that is
Yeah.
what's got me into that. Once you get Bermuda into an area, it's kind of...
Well, I'd say one of the things that we've recognized with the grasses is that you don't really know what's going to compete in that particular place until you try a number of things and you see what is competitive in those soils. Bermuda grass is a very competitive plant, but there are things that could rival it. It's just a matter of choosing other grass species, maybe dealing with the fertility a little bit different. I mean, I'm not sure if this issue is in vegetable gardens or something like that, or in pastures.
Yes.
Clover is a big one for us. We do white clover on all of our pathways, and we do nurse crops. So anytime we plant a clover crop or a legume crop, we always plant a nurse with it, which is usually an annual grass, like oats or annual ryegrass or something like that. And that suppresses the other grasses from coming in. And then when it dies, the clovers come through it and are in a heavy stand and are suppressing all the weeds, and also are great pollinating sources and nectar sources for all sorts of wild and domestic insects.
It sounds like a great question for a SARE grant, Sustainable Agriculture and Research grants, to set up a trials for that and get as many varieties as you can that you think might, do some research, figure out. Sudan grass comes to mind as a potential smother crop that might outcompete it, and maybe get a little funding and set up some trials. And it would be really beneficial for your region, it sounds like, to figure out what the best options are.
The growers are all, it's very common for them to be like, once you get Bermuda grass, just move. Like, thank you.
Do you speak with, and SAWG is a good source for you guys there in Arkansas, the Southern Agricultural Working Group. Yeah.
SAWG.
And then the edible can write about it. Yeah.
Hey, Sam Fromars here from the Food and Environment Reporting Network. You guys talked a lot about heirlooms, and I'm wondering what you think about hybrids as well. And, I know you can't save the seed and plant it and get the same plant, but is there an inherent bias against them? Or?
Well, Ken's the right one to answer this, I suppose. But I just having just written this book about seeds, I did point out that hybrids are not inherently evil. And many of our farm members are surprised to know that we use hybrids. And actually, although one of the major differences that you're told between a hybrid and an open pollinated plant is that you can't save the seed of a hybrid and replant it because you don't know what you're going to get. However, there are people who actually are working on dehybridizing hybrids. So that's just another confusing little thing. So my thing is that we're not going to get rid of them, and I think they can be useful in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. We use a fair amount of hybrids. We do trials with organic seed companies that are producing really wonderful hybrids. And also dehybridizing some of our own things like peas. We're working with Cornell to do some crosses to make F1s and then continuing self-pollination, especially with peas. It's one that we've been working with it's actually a really amazing thing to dehybridize because you see all of the recessive and dominant traits that exist in these plants, and then you go through a new selection process. It's really just another part of plant breeding.
I see hybrids as short-term solutions rather than long-term solutions. So there are times when Maybe there's a new disease and we really need to do something about it quickly, and maybe there's existing parent lines and we can cross them and we can create a hybrid to deal with that issue immediately, but it's not going to be a long-term solution. You're looking at vertical versus horizontal resistance, and that's sort of what Scott was talking about, what I'm talking about in terms of resilience. When you actually, your ultimate goal is to create an open pollinated variety to deal with an issue, it has a lot more skills genetically to draw on. When you're working with a hybrid, it just has one specific genetic characteristic that's dealing with that issue, which means that as soon as that issue changes in the least bit, that hybrid is no longer useful. So it's just a starting point. That's the way I see it. But I also have an attitude problem.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that I think it's John Novazio, who's a wonderful plant breeder, said that really no one's done any, there hasn't been any extensive research into open pollinateds for 50 years. And so that's what we need more of now. So thank you to Ken for doing it.
Hi, my name's Keith Emmerling. I'm sort of curious, you have farms of different sizes and different configurations. Could you talk a little bit about maintaining the differences in maintaining healthy ecosystems, not only in relation to the people that operate on the farm, but as far as the pollinators, as far as the interrelation of the different ecosystems, mini ecosystems with on the farm? When you're talking about different sized farms and managing different different scales of interrelated crop species and total environments?
Well, I can tell you about ours, is that we've broken our farms into subsets. So all of our dairies are lactating dairies, and then we have a birthing dairy. We have somebody that takes care of all the manure, somebody that takes care of all of the cropping, and then we also are fortunate that we have a landscape architect that works for us, and who is designing what the farm should look like 20 years from now. And but we get into a biodiversity thing too, because we have poultry, hogs, cows all together, and so we have a fairly elaborate system of how we maintain the separate entities. But we also rotate hogs into poultry houses. Most of our housing for the animals is mobile, and so we're moving things around and changing things. And then we use wetlands as buffers. You know, we intentionally create wetlands so that we have separation between crops and species, and so it's a fairly elaborate process, and you know, just managing that much property. But you get to buy bigger tractors.
Oh, okay. Which can be fun. Or I think you plow by, one of you plows by hand furrowing, right? At Quail Hill, do you?
Well, we actually had moved from a hand-push rototiller to owning 5 tractors, so we have a different style of plowing. But I actually don't. I think as long as you, I think what's really important when you're growing things, or if you're tending land, or if you're carrying land. I mean, read any of Wendell Berry's books, and you know what he's talking about is coming to know a place, coming to be native to a place. So the longer, again, it's your footsteps on the land that matter a lot, really, and what you're looking at and what you're seeing. There's I was thinking on the way in here, there's a wonderful poem that has, I've carried with me for 30 years or something like that, by Robert Duncan. He says, "Often I am permitted to return to a meadow." And someone caring for land or farming and doing it on a daily basis with that kind of attitude, "often I am permitted to return to a meadow," is then acting in harmony with the ecosystem, basically.
Just to add that on our site, it's a little bit unique. I mean, I think any farm is unique, but in our particular place, we have very broad topography. We have lots of hillsides. And so we're farming on different pieces of land that don't allow anything. specifically, or we couldn't just put anything on those places. So they, by reading the land and looking at how we could work on it, we choose different crops to fit in those areas. So that's a piece of how we diversify that landscape. Some of them are just not really valuable economically, but have great resources like the wetlands. So we want to really put the energy into getting all the rest of those services out of those places. The other really interesting thing about our place is that we have over 100,000 visitors a year. And so it also requires the space to be accessible and safe. So when we look at the place as a landscape from that standpoint, we entirely shift the idea of landscape to be farmscape, in that it has to be accessible, but it can still be very productive for pollinators, for food, for habitat, for watershed, and that we integrate all of those things wherever they seem to be best appropriately placed, I guess. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Julia Zakov. I'm currently working in the dairy industry. This is really a question for Chuck. I know currently the commodity milk prices are an all-time high. They recently surpassed the 2008 levels. And you mentioned you believe that organic milk prices will be lower than conventional within the next 2 years, if that's right. How do you see that playing out? I'm curious to hear more specifically.
Well, I think one of the comments from this morning was about some of the organic things of chickens don't go out, cows don't go out, a lot of myths. And I think as the new rules for organic are actually put in place and enforced through the certification agencies, like our cows now get 40% of their feed from pasture. You know, some of them are walking 4 and 5 miles a day. They're healthy, they eat well, they go get it themselves. And we're doing the same model with our poultry, where we plant pastures for them so that they go out and get the food themselves. And I think when you start combining the cost of what it's going to be to use synthetic feeds and to transport feed for fertilizer and those kind of things, there's going to be a crossover point where organic's going to be cheaper. And I think we see that coming on our farm within 2 years.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Yeah.
We've got time for one more question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jesslyn because I am really close to this. And as a beekeeper and an ecologist and an advocate, thank you for what you're doing, first of all. And my question really speaks to, I'm wondering, I work in sort of a consultancy capacity for small farmers and community groups in North Carolina. And one piece that I'm seeing as a big challenge for us and a barrier that I've seen is the community engagement piece around specifically bees. And I feel like it's becoming more and more in the community or in the collective consciousness that we're aware of the challenges that bees are facing and how it ties into our food system. And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to any innovative models or resources that you've seen for leveraging that community engagement, or anything that's been successful in drawing in a wider crowd beyond who's already working for sustainable food and for bees.
Well, do you know that wonderful film, The Queen of the Sun?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, I think.
It's a really
you
great
get
one.
people
It
there.
really is.
But what's been most successful on our farm is the beekeeper. We do this every year, sometimes a couple times a year, where people, I mean, it's once you bring someone to a bee, you get a group of people and you bring them to a beehive and you open up the beehive and you pull out the, everyone's around there. I mean, the beekeeper's going to do this when he or she feels comfortable with those particular bees. That's an extraordinary teaching tool, the best one, I think, really. So I think there's so much more information out now because of the colony collapse and that sort of thing, that I think people are becoming aware that we need bees. We need them, so yeah.
I'd encourage any beekeeper that you know to have some community outreach and give classes and speak about what they're doing. We're very fortunate to have a young man, Dan Carr, who's been taking care of bees at the farm, and he's had a really pretty sharp learning curve about it, and he's done really incredible work to expand the hives. And we work really closely with him with plant selection, and while we've always been planting for pollinators, it's really great to have an enthusiastic beekeeper to work in parallel with. And this year he's giving a 13-part course on it. It's just it's intriguing, really, and he's got a great following. So I know there's a lot of beekeepers in New York City and the surrounding area that are really enthusiastic folks. So.
And this isn't related to bees directly, but the Hudson Valley Seed Library grew out of community interest. I was a librarian in a public library when I started the Seed Library. And what gave me the confidence and craziness to quit my job and start doing it full time was that feeling that this was not only something I saw as a need, but also that there were a lot of people who wanted to be engaged. But interestingly, I think the #1 thing that has really helped us continue to grow that community and engage people and be able to have the conversation with people who haven't thought about it yet, which are the most important people to reach in some cases, is beauty. And you know, we commission artwork for our seed packs, and every single seed pack is designed by a different artist. And one of the talks I give is actually called Art of the Heirloom. Little do they know, I'm going to talk about genetic engineering, I'm going to talk about loss of genetic diversity, I'm going to talk about hybrids and open pollinated, I'm going to talk about all of these things. But when you start with something that people can connect to that's not necessarily directly related to it, sometimes you get more people listening and they have an open mind. And you know, thinking about Scott and other folks that I know, poetry, film, art, there's a lot of ways that you can galvanize people and bring them into the community with something beautiful in order to be able to talk about some of the more difficult issues.
If you ever want to have a lot of fun, invite an entomologist over. And we got our first hives. We sponsored a bee symposium, and the WSU entomologists who've done a lot of work on the bee claps came down, and they brought 15 hives, and they broke them apart, and everybody looked at them, and they let their bees out. And I go, well, you're going to lose your bees? They said, oh, no, they'll come back at dark. And so they did that, and they loaded up all their bees and left, and they left 3 hives. And we said, wait a second, you forgot your hives. And they said, no, those are yours. And that's how we got into having bees. And you learn very quickly when you have 3 hives and no knowledge.
Well, just like new beekeepers, the models for supporting bees are proliferating. In our area on Long Island, we have a community-supported apiary. It's actually the the honey club, we call it. And there's also someone out of Corvallis, Oregon, you might look up, called Bee Girl. She's on Twitter at Bee Girl, and she's a small-scale beekeeper and honey producer, but all the money she makes she uses to support going into schools all up and down the Oregon and Washington coast to talk to kids about beekeeping. So there's no shortage of great models to replicate. I wanted to thank our panelists very much for this great discussion.
Good afternoon. Like Tracy said, I'm Christy Mather. I am the Director of Communications for USA Pears, which is the nonprofit marketing organization that represents the 1,600 pear growers of Oregon and Washington, home to 84% of the U.S. fresh pear crop. So I'm really thrilled to be here. We're so proud to sponsor this event that gathers so many of the top food minds in North America. Just thrilled to be here. Now, there's 3 things that I would like you to learn about pears today. And first and foremost, really, this is first and foremost, how to ripen pears to perfection. Because pears are one of the few fruits that don't ripen on the tree. They actually ripen after they're harvested. And so a lot of times when you buy them at the grocery store, they're cold, they're firm, they're underripe. All you have to do is keep them at room temperature to ripen. only refrigerate pears if you want to slow their ripening process. So how do you know really when they're at the peak of ripeness? Of the 10 varieties that we grow, only one changes color as it ripens, and that's the Bartlett. So it changes from green to yellow like a banana as it ripens. So you can look at that pear and say, okay, that pear's ripe. But the rest of the varieties of pears do not actually change color as they ripen. So you have to feel them to know for sure. So we say check the neck for ripeness. The neck is the narrow part of the pear at the stem end. And if it feels soft, if it gives to gentle pressure, then you know that your pear is ripe and sweet and juicy and really at its peak flavor. Okay? Check the neck. Number 2, this is a shocker. Pears are healthy. Pears are actually one of the top fiber fruits. One medium-sized pear provides 24% of your day's fiber, 10% of your day's vitamin C. They also contain potassium. And we recently did an analysis of the Center for Disease Control's data that showed that people that eat pears have a better quality diet than people that don't. So we found this is true, this is fact. We found that people who eat pears have a higher intake of fiber, vitamin C, potassium, magnesium, copper, and other nutrients. They have less intake of added sugars in their diet, and they're 35% less likely to be obese. So we were pretty excited to get our hands on that data. It's really interesting, and we look forward to continuing some nutrition research in the future. Okay, number 3. Pears are perfect in recipes. So our consumer research that we do showed that that 80% of consumers that eat pears eat them whole as a snack. And that's a really great opportunity for us to educate consumers about all that you can do with pears, because pears can be a delicious part of any course, of any meal of the day, any type of cuisine. Pears can be poached, grilled, baked, sauteed, pureed. You can do a lot of things with pears, and I encourage you to go to our website. It's usapears.org for more than 100 great recipes that show how pears can be served at any course of any meal of the day. So 1, check the neck. 2, pears are healthy and full of fiber. And 3, start cooking with pears. And then finally, I know there's a lot of publishers, editors, and writers here, and I just want you guys to know that I am a great resource for you. Come to our table. I have my business card there, but I can provide you with orchard photography. I can provide you with recipes, recipe photography. I can hook you up with chefs nationwide that are doing really interesting things with pears in their restaurants. And I can also provide you with growers. I can introduce you to some growers so you can learn directly from some of our really great growers what it's like to be a pear grower and the challenges and opportunities that they have in the marketplace. So thank you.